shagoffs, my children! You may be wondering why we're looking at another adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness after we spent 2 years on the glorious manga version. We've done Dracula and Frankenstein like 50 times each. We can look at a different version of this story too. Professor Dyer of Miskatonic University learns of the upcoming Starkweather Moor expedition into the Antarctic, and he is shocked into action, finally describing the terrible events that ended his own expedition some time ago, to try to discourage others from entering the Mountains of Madness. The purpose of the original trip was, of course, simple scientific exploration. Dyer himself was a geologist, and the main goal was acquiring soil and rock samples from various parts of the snowy continent. The hope was that they'd only be there a single Antarctic summer and be done with it. Well, to be fair, you were done with it afterwards. All throughout the story, Dyer and the others can hear a terrible sound echoing across the land. Takalili, takalili. It is written off as various things. The wind, air piping through caves and in discordant music. But in Dyer's memories, the sound is there as he studies a book from Miskatonic's library. The Necronomicon. The team has 5 planes for the trip, 4 for setting up new base camps, with the 5th staying back with the boats as an emergency rescue vehicle, should the other 4 be lost. As the weeks pass, they begin blasting and drilling for the samples, discovering something very odd. Fragments of slate with markings that seem to indicate some form of life, during a time when no life should exist. As they continue on, Professor Lake of the biology department wants to redirect their efforts to follow more of the strange markings, though Dyer is reluctant. Any deviation from the plan could mean their work would not be over in March like they planned. But eventually, Lake's stubbornness and the words of his colleagues get him to cave and allow Lake to lead an expedition deeper west, and a week later returns with more samples. Dyer still does not want to pursue this any further, especially when Lake is demanding the use of all their planes for this, but it is put to vote and the other scientists want to explore this more. Professor Poverty, Dyer's closest friend and confidant, encourages Dyer to come with them, but he merely wishes them luck. Should've wished harder. For weeks, those in Dyer's camp get scattered reports over the radio of what the expedition dealt with. Mostly harsh winter, more samples that encourage them to push onwards, and mountain ranges larger than any other seen by human eyes. For several sections, we see things only from the perspective of the radio transmissions from Lake's team, increasing tension. While Dyer's team was preparing to reorganize their explorations to provide more fuel to Lake's trip, they discovered a cave system containing strange corpses. Whatever it is they found, the dogs do not like them. They attempt to dissect one of the bizarre corpses, but its anatomy is almost completely unrecognizable. 2 respiratory systems, sensory organs whose functions can only be guessed at, and a smell that's almost unbearable. Their only point of comparison is to, indeed, the Necronomicon, beings described in that book as elder things. When asked about the Necronomicon, Dyer explains it. A book containing an account of the history of the Elder Things, ancient aliens that came to Earth and made life on it. As a joke or a mistake. The book was written in the 8th century by a mad poet named Abdul al-Khazred who, according to legend, was killed in the streets by an invisible creature. Before its more well-known title, the Necronomicon was called Al-Azif, whistling of the wind, or a weird sound or noise, describing, of course, the same noise that Dyer heard. Typical marketing strategy. If it doesn't sell, retitle it and release it all over again. Lake's team was supposed to check in with them the next morning, but no communication was made. They had multiple radios, so only a massive catastrophe could have kept them from contacting them. As such, Dyer organizes a rescue mission with the remaining plane, and discovers the horrors left behind. Men and dogs mangled and torn apart, evidence of strangulation and lacerations, equipment and notes missing. One man almost seems to have been dissected and left on a table. Their best assumption is that one member of the group, Gedney, murdered all of them for some reason, with them only assuming that because they cannot find his body. Of course, they only briefly note that several of the alien corpses are missing too. Believing that Gedney could not have gotten far, Dyer and another professor, Danforth, begin a search for him with the plane, eventually encountering the titular Mountains of Madness and the whistling noise from before. But past the mountain range, they find it. A city! Large and imposing, and at the bottom of the world, it still mostly stands. Exploring it, they find the history of the Elder Things, their original life in the sea, moving to land before Cthulhu drove them back to the sea. But then the Shoggoths, the slave creatures that the Elder Things had grown to serve them and build their cities, rebelled, and other inhabitants of Earth eventually drove the Elder Things to the Antarctic city. The tall mountains sprung up around them, and the creatures worshipped and feared those mountains. Never assume, my children, that man is either the oldest or the last of Earth's masters. The old ones were, the old ones are, and the old ones shall be. An ice age sprung up and dealt with the Elder Things. But otherwise, Dyer and Danforth explore deeper to find the body of Gedney, realizing that not all the corpses they found were corpses, that the Elder Things were merely sleeping. But there is a deeper horror still within the city, and I don't mean the giant blind penguins. I of course mean the Shoggoths, the shambling masses that still inhabit the dead city. And they are the source of the whistling sound. The two humans make their escape back to their plane upon encountering it, but Danforth looks back as they flee the mountains. And while in the manga we are not privy to what he beheld, we have a glimpse in the reflection of his goggles. The tentacles of the Shoggoths, large as the alien skyscrapers themselves, reaching up out of the ground. Surely a thing like that is enough for a man to go mad. For the safety of mankind, they decide to keep this ordeal secret, but the news of the new expedition has frightened Dyer to recount the whole thing. And Danforth? Well, he is one of the few who has now read the Necronomicon cover to cover, and the news of the expedition has gotten him to hear the whistling again. A great story, my children! And great stories deserve to be retold sometimes. Just as I'm retelling it to you now.